Hello and welcome to the Healthified Mother Podcast. This is episode 2. My name is Cory and this is my lovely wife, Kristi. We are going to talk today about immunity and how our family of 10 children and us, how we handle illnesses, immune issues, and all around family health. As well as we have an upcoming session that Kristi is working on about boosting your immunity. So, Kristi, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
So I'm Kristi Dugan. I'm the Healthified Mother. I have a very different philosophy when it comes to immunity and health. So I'm gonna read that. I just prepared a little thing to read here, and then we'll go into this more. So my philosophy around health and immunity is different. I do not immediately seek for a remedy. I believe God gave us everything our bodies need to be healthy. It's all here on this earth. When I get a cold or a flu, I typically let it go for 3 to 5 days before I do anything to treat symptoms. I don't try to nip it in the bud. First, I see how my immune system responds to it, and then I go from there. I cut out processed foods, sugar, gluten, dairy, and then I load up on the fresh fruits and vegetables. I'm always learning and try to keep an open mind. I spend most of my time in preventative maintenance, caring for my family's needs and my own needs throughout the year. In this way, I am able to avoid serious illness in my life, and my family rarely gets sick. When we do, it's usually very short-lived. I don't try to avoid illness. I know that a stomach bug, food poisoning, rashes, fevers, colds, they're just a part of life. I do not fear them, and I have learned many skills to take care of myself and my family when these issues do arise. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is what do we do when these issues arise, because they're going to, because we're mortal, and that's just what happens in life. If you are looking for a secret ingredient, a flu bomb, or some essential oil that I use to magically make my family healthy, you have come to the wrong place.
Studying what you've been studying, and one of the things I've been studying is like the placebo effect and its sheer power over our health, like, which is just the law of belief. What we believe about our health is true about our health. So if there is a magic bullet, it really just comes down to right here, what's between your ears. Now, before we go on, I do want to just mention our third episode is going to be exciting because we're going to have our first guest, Tina, our new friend. We've been working with her husband, Daniel, for a while now, and we've recently come to know his wife, Tina. And she's going to be our first guest next week, and we are going to be talking about manifesting. We're excited for it because it's something that we're trying to put into practice, right? Putting good mindset and in place in our life. So that's for next week. Let's move on here. I want to talk a little bit about our history, the health history of our family. Again, we have 10 kids, and we have had no major significant problems with health issues. And praise God, praise the Lord, that we have been blessed in that way. But we still have had things that we've dealt with. And it's been like the statement that you just read is like the representation of where we are now in our evolution of how we deal with health. And we're still learning, we're still growing, but it wasn't always that way. I want to mention our first child, when he was still breastfeeding, he got thrush. And you and I just saw his mouth, saw how white it was inside, and we were just like, deer in headlights. And so we didn't know what to do. So I took him to the clinic, And he simply like, he looked at it and he's like, oh, and it was a PA. It wasn't even a doctor. The PA was like, yeah, that's thrush. Here, take this cream. And it was, what is it? Nystatin, an antifungal cream. And it was just put it in his mouth orally. And in like a couple days it was gone.
For lots of different times. I remember that time, just being a little worried, like, oh no, what's wrong with my baby? Is there something wrong with my baby? But I think it was maybe 3 or 4 days after he came home from the hospital, he got a cold, and his nose was stuffy and he was having a little trouble breathing, and we were trying to use a little bulb syringe, and we're like, oh my gosh, like we just both had like this freak out session where we realized we're in charge of this little being, and if he dies, it's our fault, right? Like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? We've got to figure out how you care for a child.
And that's pretty much come with a lot of successes on our part. Simply like, I look at the biggest success. I tell people this jokingly, and I don't want to preface this. Like, I don't feel like we're here to tell anybody what to do medically. I don't feel like we're giving, we're not giving medical advice, but we're sharing what we've learned and how we do things in our family and what has worked for us. And so prefacing with that, I tell people proudly, like, most of our kids haven't met a doctor.
We went to the hospital once and urgent care twice. So yeah, like some people, maybe that's just more part of your mortal experience, right? And for her, I guess so.
And there were accidents. She broke her collarbone, and then she also had an ear infection that we were treating successfully at home, but she went swimming too soon, and then it got reinfected and was getting real bad. I mean, she was swelling in back here, so we took her to urgent care. And
she gashed her eyebrow pretty deep.
Oh, so that's three occasions. Yeah,
that was the third time.
She had a huge gash, and we'll talk about that. Well, we can talk about that now. Isn't that funny? Like that huge gash. We thought they were going to give her stitches, and they didn't even give her stitches.
Yeah. So I took her in thinking, well, she's a girl. I don't want her to have some gnarly scar on her face. I better not just butterfly bandage it. I think I'll take her in and make sure that, it's closed properly so it doesn't look bad later on. I took her in. We waited forever in urgent care, like hours and hours. And when we finally got in there, they told me ahead of time it was going to be like $250 or something. And I'm like, okay, all right, we can do that. And then we go back, wait another long time in the waiting room. Finally, PA comes in. He's like, oh, yeah, that's, I'm not going to do stitches because it would probably make it look worse. The scarring would be worse. I'm just going to use some steri strips and close that up with a little medical super glue. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, is that what you would like me to do? And I'm like, sure, I guess. So that's what he did. And then we got a bill in the mail for $750. So almost $1,000 for us to go in and put a little super glue and some steri strips on her eyebrow. And I'm like, okay, so I have super glue and a box of steri strips in my house now because I'm not paying any $1,000 for somebody to, close a little gap and super glue it. So yeah, we've lessons learned. Like I didn't know what they would have done. Now I do. Now I don't bother with the urgent care for things like that, right?
We have learned the value of butterfly bandages, steri strips, and medical super glue for sure. So I like our philosophy has been to do as much as we can at home. That's really what it comes down to. Is we learn and we take on, like, especially in the beginning, we weren't as willing, to take on challenges. But now, like, when a health issue arises, if it's significant, we see it as a challenge and we try and take care of it at home. Like with Eliza's like it was the most recent health issue we've had with her ear infection. We treated it successfully. She just went swimming. Like it started to feel better and it didn't hurt anymore. So she went swimming again and got it wet and like got it reinfected. And we still tried to treat it again, but it just was too bad. And she was getting some serious swelling behind her ear. But all they did is gave her antibiotics. Like all the hoopla of all the hoops that we jumped through and all the things that they did, they just gave her antibiotics.
Yeah, didn't they do like a whole CT scan and everything? And like, oh yeah, everything's fine. Here's some medicated ear drops and a round of
antibiotic drops in her ear, and that was it.
And she
essentially it was a simple solution for all and it was, I don't even know, like a couple $1,000s.
Right. Take it for 2 weeks. She didn't, because she went to girls camp and lost it or forgot where it was, whatever. Anyway, she took it for maybe 4 days and then was fine, right? So she didn't even take all of the rounds of antibiotics, didn't even, put the eardrops in more than 3 or 4 days, and she was fine. So yeah, we're really low key in our approach to health and wellness for our kids. We definitely don't get very worked up or hysterical. It's just, okay, looks like there's some blood here. Let's get a Band-Aid on that. Or, what if the kids are getting super dramatic, sometimes I'll meet them at their level so they know I hear and I validate them, right? So like, mom, it's bleeding. Ah! I will get to that level. Oh my gosh, I think we need to cut it off. And then they're, no, and they realize like that's silly, okay, let's just put a Band-Aid on it. And then that they know I heard them. They know I'm validating, like, yeah, this is a real issue. I hear you, it hurts. Put a Band-Aid on it, right? So we just don't really spend a lot of time worried or concerned about our health or our children's health. We just spend most of our time doing preventative maintenance.
And before we go on to that topic, like, I want to say you're the validator. You definitely do a good job of validating. But when it's me, I'm the stoic. And, I heard someone say once that, when they were talking about young children, when they fall or get hurt or whatever, and they look at us, whatever reaction we give is training them into how they should react. And so I just play it stoic, and because they can if we overreact, then they learn to overplay the injury, and it might even, like, literally, because pain is just a phenomenon of the mind, it might even be more painful if they react with more hoopla around the fall or the scrape or whatever. Some might say that we're uncaring towards our children in this regard, but it's in reality, I see it as like, I care so much. I don't want you to overreact, and I don't want you to feel more pain than necessary. Let's just fix the problem and then move on. Like, make your life happier. Just minimize the amount of time that you experience this problem, this pain. Because I mean, honestly, it's amazing. Like, it's amazing to watch kids, and like, it's like when they hit and I can hear it and I'm like, wow, that sounded terrible, but I'm stoic. And then they just rub their head and like, oh, and then they're fine in like 2 seconds. It's an amazing kid. So kids are durable. Having 10 of them, I've witnessed just how durable they are. And so, like, going from having our first child and experiencing the feeling of how little they are and how vulnerable I think they are. I remember that. Like, I remember thinking our oldest was just so vulnerable and fragile, like a China doll. And to now, it's like, no, kids are, from the time they're born, they're not fragile. They're fairly robust.
Yeah, and like Heavenly Father has, I feel like every person has an appointed time in which to live. And yes, you could cut that time short, but for the most part, it's amazing how we as humans survive when we see like the things that happen in this world. Like you just watch some videos of like people narrowly escaping, these crazy car accidents and whatever. Like, wow, if it's not your time to go, it's not your time to go. I fully believe and call on angels to come help me as a mother and help me keep my kids safe. And I just don't worry about things I cannot control. So I do try to keep my house safe and clean and healthy and well, but I don't worry about things I can't control, because that just causes stress and other issues that are, I may unnecessarily attract those things into my life because I'm focused on them rather than focusing on what I do want to have happen in my family, and that's health and wellness. So I try and focus on that and avoid worrying about what I don't want to have happen.
Right. And this is something that we have written here to cover, is the prolonged stress and anxiety is, we feel, the number one cause of lowered immunity. And in response to that, if you have a lot of stress and anxiety in your home and in your life, and your kids therefore experience a lot of that, if you want to boost your immunity, practice mindful gratitude for 10 minutes a day, and do that with your children, and it'll boost their immunity. But even if you just, as a mother or a father, if you just practice mindful gratitude for 10 minutes a day, and there have been studies by Joe Dispenza, if anyone has heard of him. He's done a study and it was like, I think either a 50 or a 200% increase in some immune response or immune strength that they found for a week, just practicing mindful gratitude for 10 minutes a day for a week, and people's immunity, I think it went up 50%.
Yeah. And that's amazing. We can do so much with just our beliefs and focusing on believing that we are healthy and well. And I think it was in, what's that book? The Magic of Thinking Big. In The Magic of Thinking Big, he said, act well, believe you're well, and you will be well, right? You're going to be as healthy as you think you are. You're going to be as successful as you believe you are, right? And nobody wants to hear about your health problems. And I mean, I've experienced this. Somebody says, how are you doing? And well, I've got a cold going on, and it's kind of, you grump about, they're like, and they walk off. They don't want to hear. They're not really asking. They don't really want to hear about your health issues, right? When they say, how are you doing? All they want to hear is, fine, I'm good, right? Like, and I'm not saying like you should never tell anybody if you're struggling or whatever, but for the most part, like, people just don't want to hear about that. And you're not going to get any sympathy, really. So it's like, don't even bother. Believe you're well, act like you're well, talk like you're well, you will be well. He goes through a bunch of examples in that book, and I just thought that was awesome because it's so true.
Anyone who hasn't read that book, got to read that book. And that section is highly valuable. I totally agree with what he's saying there. That, I mean, for example, the last time I was sick, and it was just a month or two ago, I had a persistent cold, and I'd feel more miserable, a little bit better, more miserable, and it was like just going on day after day. And I know you were getting frustrated, and you said something. It was like a Saturday night, and I don't know if you can remember what you said, but you were just like, well, why don't you just think that you're healthy and full of vitality then? Because we were having a conversation about mindset, and I was just like, well, because I was just dwelling on my own suffering. Like, that's honestly, I was just dwelling on my own suffering, and I thought I could try that. And so it was late at night, and so for the next hour, I just kept saying to myself over and over again, I'm the possibility of health and vitality. And I tried to put as much belief in it as I could, and then went to sleep. And I woke up, and I felt better. And then like that, after that, like I know, like, well, I'm going to keep saying it. So I kept saying it, and I kept doing the best I could to believe it, exercise faith, that the Lord would help me. And sure enough, I got better. That was what ended, my suffering, so to speak. And I started to get better. And in a couple of days I was fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's true. Like you believe it, you choose into that. It's like role playing. You believe that you are a certain character, or that you're supposed to be a certain way, and you become that. Your subconscious mind plays that out in your mind. It just plays that pattern out in your life, and you become a healthy person. You become a cheerful person. You become an early riser, or whatever it is that you're, reprogramming in your subconscious mind. It's amazing.
I mean, it's like hypochondriacs. They always believe that they're getting sick, and if they see someone else sick, they like associate that illness with themselves in their minds, and then they start having those symptoms. I think our mindset and our beliefs are definitely a huge factor in our health and into what we experience around our health. Definitely. Kristi has a book that one of the first books that she read around health that really started her journey and inspired her in helping our family have a healthier lifestyle.
Yeah. So this little book has been kind of my Bible. It's called How to Raise a Healthy Child in Spite of Your Doctor. And it's by a doctor, Dr. Robert Mendelsohn. He's an MD. And I'm pretty certain he has passed away, because this book was written in like 1983 or something. And he was pretty old back then, 1984. So it's, a 40-year-old book, and you can see his picture. He was pretty old then. So if he's still around, wow. But this book has become like my little Bible. And I don't refer to, it's been years since I've even read it, but I go back to things I read in it in my mind. You know what? This is going to be fine. Like he tells a joke. He says, this is a running joke among doctors. Like we all know this and believe this. He said, if you treat strep, like people get strep all the time, right? If you treat strep, it'll be gone in a week. If you don't treat strep, it'll be gone in 7 days. Like, wait, what? He's like, there's really nothing that we can do as a doctor to really make a difference for strep. Don't treat it. It's going to be gone in about a week. So don't bother going in and getting antibiotics and all of that. There are certainly things you can do to, provide nutrition and building blocks and make it easier for your body to heal. But you don't need to go in for some medical over-the-counter drug or whatever, or prescription or antibiotic, because it's going to be gone in 7 days. So I'm just going to read you a couple of the chapter headings, because they're phenomenal, and they really helped me to realize, like, oh, okay, I really don't need to run to the clinic every time that my baby has a stuffy nose or a fever or is a raspy cough or whatever it is, right? And we really are concerned, especially as new parents. Oh my goodness, what do I do? What do I do? And we feel like we have to do something. But in reality, their little body knows what to do. It was programmed to heal itself, and given the proper nutrition and ingredients and nourishment, it will be fine. So chapter 7, fever, your body's defense against disease. We have been taught, mostly by the drug companies on TV, that fevers are bad and that we need Tylenol, right? Like, oh, we just have to have Tylenol. We have to have it on hand for our kids, or ibuprofen or something, right? I will readily admit, none of my children have ever had Tylenol or ibuprofen. I don't give it to them. And you might think, oh my gosh, you're such a mean parent, making your kids suffer through all this pain. My kids don't complain about pain. And they went to we had a kid who had an abscess, right? And he was screaming and writhing in pain. Took him to the dentist. They removed it. They said, when this numbing, stuff wears off, right? He is going to be in serious pain. Make sure you have Tylenol on hand for him. I did not have Tylenol on hand for him. He was literally running and playing at the playground. He probably shouldn't have been. Needed to rest some more. But it didn't cause any problems, thank goodness. But he was literally running around and playing with his brothers and sisters at the playground maybe 2 hours after the procedure. Like, he was not screaming and writhing in pain. So thankfully, they didn't say that in front of him. And I think because of that, he didn't get the belief that it's going to hurt so bad when the numbing stuff wears off. So
there's like, I learned this from Dr. Joe Dispenza. I never knew this, but there's pain gateways all throughout our body. And I think going back to what we talked about earlier, like when our kids have an accident or fall and they look at us to see like, well, how should I react from this experience? And then when we teach them how to react, like they learn how to activate or deactivate or not even use, like turn on and off those pain gateways. And sure, like I really think this is a thing where it's like the pain or the injuries might still be there, but they don't activate the pain gateway. They don't open it up like, or they shut it off real quick. Like, I just don't need to feel that pain, and just shut it off. Like, I really think that that's a thing that we're trained, and we train ourselves, and we can retrain ourselves, and we can retrain our children to open and close these pain gateways to maximize or minimize the pain we experience.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And with Tylenol and ibuprofen, what they do is not only do they stop, that signal of pain to our brain, which, it's like cutting the wire. Oh, I am having a pain. I'm just going to cut that wire so the little light in my car doesn't tell me there's a problem. Just going to remove that. So that in and of itself is not a good thing. But it also suppresses inflammation, as if inflammation is a bad thing. And inflammation and fever is it's your body's response. It's all the little blood cells rushing to wherever they need to go to do their job, to work on, fighting an infection or healing a cut or whatever it is. And by giving Tylenol or ibuprofen, you're stopping that little army of blood cells from going there and healing your body and suppressing it. It takes much longer to fully heal from something when you're putting these drugs in your body that suppress your inflammation. So fever is your body's defense against disease, and you don't want to suppress it with drugs that are unnecessary. Your body needs a fever. We have never taken our children to a clinic for a fever, a cold, a flu. And that is not to say I would never, because I don't know. And I'm not going to make some stupid ultimatum. I would never take my child, because if I felt like there was a reason to, and I felt my intuition and the spirit tell me your child needs to go in, I would absolutely take my child in. But so far, I have never felt the need to take my child in. And within a day or two, their fever's down, they're fine. And we've never had to take them to a clinic for a cold, a flu, a fever, a rash. And we just let it's, keep them hydrated, make sure that maybe they need electrolytes or some orange juice or something. But just let their body do what their body was created to do. Chapter 8, headache, usually emotional, but pain is real. And then he goes on to say, like, you can have emotional headaches, you can have physical headaches, you can have, headaches from all sorts of different things, but you don't need to treat them with how does he say it? Oh yeah, headaches rarely require medical treatment. And when they do, it's treatment of the disease or injury, not the headache, right? Treat whatever is causing it, the underlying root cause of the problem. Don't treat the symptoms. And that's something we do as a family. We never bother treating the symptoms. We always try to find what's the root? What's underlying? Why is this a problem? Treat that, not just the symptoms. Oh, well, I have a runny nose. I'm going to treat it with a tissue. Like, is that going to help, do anything? That's kind of what it's like when we're treating the symptoms. We're not really healing anything. We're just wiping our nose, right?
Or I'm going to stuff paper up my nose so that nothing comes out.
Right.
Yeah. So before we go on to that point of like, what we do, how we avoid treating symptoms and treating the root causes, I wanted to go back to what you said, because it's like one of the foundations, I think, of what you've started as the Healthified Mother, is the principle of seeking to be in harmony with the laws of nature, and going to I can't remember how this relates to what you said about being sick in the immune system, but it relates to pregnancy, where the woman's body on the inside, when you're delivering a baby, is trying to open up. But then if the woman is afraid, and what do you do when you're afraid or anxious? You huddle down and you shrink. So if the outside of the body is trying to shrink and huddle because you're in pain or afraid, and the inside is trying to open up, there's conflict. And so part of what you do with pregnant women and helping them prepare for birth is trying to help them learn to be in a place, or to be as relaxed as possible on the inside and on the outside, to facilitate birth. And so that's to be in harmony with what is nature trying to do here. And so it relates to inflammation. Like, the body is having a natural reaction, and we want to be in harmony with that, with what nature is trying to do, not fight it. Like that's something that society has taught us, I think, to our detriment as individuals, really, and families, that we need to undo or fight against nature's behavior in our own bodies and elsewhere, but specifically in around our own health. Like, oh, you have a fever, we need to fight that fever. Oh, you have inflammation, we need to fight the inflammation, as if they were the problem. And that's the thing, we've been taught to believe that they are the problem. And that's so we have a completely different philosophy of like, no, we're going to trust nature and trust its principles and how it's operating and what it's trying to accomplish. And that's what we want to, again, because our bodies are what heal us. Doctors don't heal us. Medicines don't heal us. It's our bodies, always, 100% of the time. I mean, there's probably godly miracles and healings, but other than that, our bodies heal themselves.
Absolutely. Well, and certainly God performs miracles, but we live in a society where we expect instant gratification. I want a new cell phone. I want it now. I want, I need some new shoes. These ones aren't really nice. Oh, I'm going to get on Amazon right now and order it. And it's at my door the next day, right? Like, we live in this instant gratification world. And we've come to kind of expect instant gratification miracles.
Instant relief.
When we think about miracles in the scriptures, like Moses parting the Red Sea, or Abraham and Sarah having a baby, or Elizabeth and Zacharias having a baby, right? Like, they were praying for years. Those children of Israel were backed up against the edge of the Red Sea. There was nowhere to go. They'd been in Egypt 400 years of oppression, prayers to Heavenly Father to be freed. 10 plagues they went through before God says, all right, opens the Red Sea. They escape on the other side. The Egyptians are drowned, right? Before that miracle happened, so much faith and prayer and dedication went into that. And we're like, oh my gosh, I have a cold and I said a prayer and I'm not better and it's already been a whole day. Like, hang on, guys. Like, why are we believing that we should just have this instant miracle or instant gratification from all things? And I really feel like illness is oftentimes just a way to help us slow down, rejuvenate, take a break, de-stress. And if we use that time properly, it really can be like a rejuvenating, relaxing time, instead of resisting it and fighting it and trying to push through, well, I got to keep going to work even with this head cold or whatever it is. Like, we prolong the illness because we resist it and we fight it, and what you resist persists. And if we just open to it, receive it, let it pass through like a normal thing, a natural process that happens in the world, we have an illness and in 2 or 3 days it's gone. If we get enough rest, if we stay hydrated, etc. But instead we're like, oh, I got to keep going to work. Oh, I got to keep pushing through. I got to get rid of this thing. I'm going to take like 45 supplements. What else have you got? Throw it at me, all your recommendations. And I get that all the time. I have a lot of friends who say, what would you do? Or I have a cold, what do you do? And I'm like, you don't want to know. Like, I don't do anything for the most part. And, like, I'm sorry, I'm not helpful if you're looking for this magic pill that's going to cure your cold in a day or make you all better from a flu or a rash or whatever it is. Like, I'm actually going to advocate that you rest, relax, experience it, don't resist it, and then, let it pass on as just another experience in your life without it causing, an issue for you.
Like as best as you can, try and make it as a meaningless experience in your mind as you can, right? Like, accept it, experience it. What you're experiencing, you're sick, like a hurricane that's coming through. You've got a hurricane of a flu coming through your body, and make it as meaningless as possible. Make it as meaningless as possible so that once it goes, once the hurricane is gone and the winds die down, like, it's gone, rather than like holding on to it.
Absolutely. And that's where, the preventative maintenance comes in. Is, sure, you can install storm shutters and, there's things you can do to prepare for a hurricane, right? You can build a house soundly on a good foundation. There's a lot you can do ahead of time. But when the hurricane shows up, it is not the time to start putting in your storm shutters, well, this is a 2-week project, I'm going to do it in 15 minutes. Like, that's not the time. So this is not the time to be, chugging elderberry syrup or whatever it is. Like, all of that stuff needs to be happening throughout the entire year. You should be healthy, doing things all year long to maintain a healthy body and immune system, and not try and just like, oh, I'm gonna fight it right now when I have this cold, and forget about it all the rest of the time. So that's kind of my philosophy and how we live as a family, is all year long we're doing things to take care of our health. And it's not just in the moment when we have a sickness, then we start, sucking on a cough drop or whatever it is. Like, not so much.
Right. So now going back to a point that you had moved on to, because here's something simple that we do. Again, we try and treat as much as we can at home. And our best friend, when something comes up that we haven't experienced before, Google is our best friend.
Sure. Doctors use Google.
When they come up upon something they don't know and recognize, they Google it.
Yep. I've been in the doctor's office when they are pulling up symptoms and Googling. And I've had friends that say, I went to the doctor and they were Googling my symptoms. And I'm like, Yeah, because Google knows more than doctors, because doctors are humans and they can't study and understand and
And
memorize like
remember.
everything, right? So
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with using Google. I don't fault the doctors for doing that. I'm like, good, smart. They're not trying to, well, let me pull out everything I ever learned in my college classes 4 years ago. What, like, come on, guys. Let them use all of the resources they have at hand. If they can use Google, I can use Google.
And in Google Images, not just the words, but like I can't remember what it was, but you were taking pictures of something that was wrong with one of our kids, and you were comparing it to pictures on Google Images to see like to try and figure out like what's going on here, what's the story behind what our child was experiencing. I don't even remember what it was.
But yeah, I have done that many, many times, and I'm like, okay, so this is probably what's going on here. I'm going to treat it as if it was this, and if it doesn't respond and if this doesn't fix things, then we'll, go to the next step.
Reassess.
But
yeah, but also like Googling it, trying to and then taking whatever we come to like you do this more than I do, but like you'll read a few articles, because there's always like health articles that are available, free ones, about not the certain diagnosis, and they'll give basic information. So we'll just peruse these articles to get a basic information to get an idea of like, well, how serious is this? And it gives a very it's been very helpful, just Googling it, comparing it to the images, comparing it to other people's experiences, and then reading a few articles, especially when it's something we've never dealt with. And then we come from a position of like, oh, rather than just going to the doctor, I don't know what's wrong with my kid, like we can make an assessment for ourselves, like what might we do for the next step. And that's served us very well. I mean,
sure.
The results are the
we
results
also
are.
use resources around us. Like, we have friends and family members who are in the medical field, and I will text them or I will call them and say, hey, I have this thing going on. My child has this thing going on. What would you do? It looks like my son might have broke his toe. What should I do? Hey, you know what? If you take them in, all they're going to do is like put him in a boot and let it heal. So keep him off his feet for a little bit and see what happens, And it ended up that it was just jammed. He hadn't broken it anyways. And
it was like really swollen.
Right. But that saved me a trip to the, ER or the clinic, because I'm like, well, if it's a broken, toe, they're not really going to do anything about it. So I'm not going to bother. And we just kept him off his feet. The swelling went down. He's fine.
I mean, there's people, like, society has like this addiction to know. Like, we have to know what happened and what's wrong. And I think we have kind of not necessarily the opposite, because it's not about knowing. It's about the wellness after the fact. So whether his toe was broken or not, we still don't know whether his toe was broken or not. The point is, we were seeking to get him to wellness as soon as possible. And that happened on its own.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the result you're looking for? Wellness? Great. However you get there is how you get there. So like Cory said, like you said earlier, we're not trying to give anybody advice like, don't go see a doctor, do go see a doctor. This is when you should, this is when you shouldn't. Like, use your own intuition. God gave you these children as your stewardship. You're their parent. You have the personal revelation. You have the intuition to know what's best for them. So don't listen to our podcast and say, well, I won't do this or I will do that. Like, just use your own intuition. We're just telling you what we've done in our family to keep our family well.
And to minimize expenses regarding expensive doctor visits.
Right. Yeah, because with 10 kids, like we could literally always be in the urgent care if we ran in for, every little thing, right?
Right. So the next thing here to discuss, like, and this fits right in with where we are in the discussion, like, fear is the enemy, not minor health issues. Knowledge is power. Don't attract illnesses with your fears.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things that the book that I referenced earlier, this How to Raise a Healthy Child book, it just goes through and explains like almost all of the childhood illnesses, what you can expect your body to kind of do. You know, here's what happens, here's how this disease plays out, here's how it runs its course, here's some things that I would do as a doctor to treat them, right? And he just kind of goes through all of that. Here's the symptoms. So if you have, 8 out of 10 symptoms, you can say, you know what, I may or may not have this illness, but I'm going to treat it as if I did. And he kind of gives you some of those remedies and things. And then he also gives you some examples of when you should maybe go in, right? If it gets to this point, like, go see a medical professional. And having that knowledge made me relax as a mom and made me, okay, all right, I don't need to be afraid of every little thing, like my newborn baby with a stuffy nose. I don't need to worry about that, because here's how it would be treated if I did take them into a clinic. And here's, what I can expect. It's probably going to last 2 or 3 days, right? He just goes through, and that can make you feel at peace. That can make you feel like you know what to do, when it might be more concerning and when you should seek some outside help, etc. And just having an understanding and a knowledge gives you that comfort and peace, instead of having to run around like a chicken with your head cut off every time there's some issue. You've already, like, I'd read through, by the time I had 2 kids, I'd read through this book and was like, oh, okay, that's good. I know what's going to happen next. And it usually played out just like he said it would, and I wasn't concerned.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's it's a hard place to get to sometimes, depending, where it's all about your mentality. It goes back to that so much, because if something's wrong, like your child has a fever, and you think the thought, what if it gets worse? If you live in that place of what if it gets worse, then your fear increases, right? And then you're just like, well, if I don't take him to the hospital, what if he's gonna die? Like you'll get to the dying place real easy, and you'll just be so worried you can't not take your child to the doctor if they're starting to get a fever, and you keep thinking, what if? And fear is an enemy to health, and your health as the parent, and your child's health as the child.
Yeah, and I think that we as a society have kind of caused our own problems in this way, that back in the day you had the doctor came out to you with this little black bag, and he treated you if you had a problem. And now they tell you when to come in. I'll see you again in 2 weeks. Like, don't tell me when I'm going to come in. I'll come in when I want to come in if I feel there's a problem, right? But when we do go in, I don't even know how many times I've heard people say, I went into the doctor and they didn't do a thing for me. We want them to do something for us. And so they've gotten really good at writing out little prescriptions and handing them to us because we want them to do something. And if they don't have anything that they can really do, for example, strep throat, they know it's going to go away in about 7 days, but you want them to do something, well, then they're going to write out a little prescription and hand it to you, and here you go. But really, it's unnecessary. But we've created that problem because we want them to do something. And they might say, like, well, go home and exercise, go home and eat some fruits and vegetables. No, you're supposed to do something for me, doc. Don't tell me I have to do something. I don't want to have to do something. I'm paying you to fix me. The doctor can't fix you. Nobody can fix you. Your body fixes itself. So go home and eat your vegetables, right? Like, do what the doctor recommended. But because we as a society want that instant gratification, we want to be fixed right away, we want some magic cure or pill, that's what we've got. Now we have all these prescription happy doctors, because it keeps them happy and it keeps the patients happy. And I remember I went to a naturopathic doctor and I had some like carpal tunnel stuff going on. He gave me some exercises and then he wrote a prescription for like some pain medication. And I was like, I don't want a prescription. I'm not going to use that. And he was like, what? You don't want a prescription? And I was like, no, I'll just do these exercises if that's what you think it is. And he's like, okay. And within 2 weeks, I was fine. The symptoms were gone. I did all those exercises. I didn't want some pain med, right? And he was just shocked and surprised, because I think everybody's like, give me something, doc, give me something for the pain. And they're like, okay. And they just want to please their customers, their clients, but really like their patients, whatever, like you don't need that. We don't need that. And so, trying to let your body do its own thing before you turn to supplements and pills and remedies. Like, I think that's really, really important.
This kind of touches on something like, in my mind, two of the laws of nature that we try and live by. One is the law of balance, and then the other is the law of gestation. Like, certain things take a certain amount of time to happen. Like for a seed to grow into a plant, there's a certain amount of time, depending on the seed, what type of seed it is, and so illnesses, they'll have their gestation period of happening and then of disappearing, and just trusting in that natural flow. And like, you can recognize when something, with experience and studying and reading of other people's experiences, and like that book that you're talking about, like where he tells you what to expect. When something doesn't go as expected, that's when you're like, well, now I need another opinion. And maybe you first go to a friend, an experienced parent, and then we go to the doctor. If that doesn't satisfy it, and if the weirdness, like with Eliza's, like I'd never seen someone's swelling back there, and that was what was troubling to us. And I was just like, yeah, let's go in. Like, I don't know what the swelling back there was getting, like it was really like almost as up to her ear. That was something new we hadn't experienced, and that made me willing to go in. Like, we know we can treat ear infections, but it was just getting to a level beyond us, and that was evident. But what I really wanted to talk about is balance. Like our health, sometimes you can say it took how many years for you to build up and have this health problem? Or even for our kids, like if we've been feeding them poorly or whatever, like sometimes certain things take time to build up, and it took like a year, it took a month or 3 years. It took an amount of time to get to a place to where all of a sudden we have these symptoms. Sometimes it's not immediate. Sometimes with a cold or flu, it's just immediate. And so it's the law of gestation and the law of balance is like, if it took that long to get there, it's not going to end in a day. Normally it's a balance. It's going to take time. And why I bring this up is because one of the major changes in our family that you've brought in is cleansing, doing liver cleanses, because you read a book, Cleanse to Heal, and that took our health to another level. Can you speak on that, like trying to return to balance in like doing it long term?
Right. So our liver is like a filter. It is filtering all of the toxins, all of the emotions, all of the stuff that is going through our body. Our liver filters that, right? And so all of our organs play a very important role, but if our liver gets clogged and sluggish, our other organs start having a hard time functioning correctly. And so we start to have health issues. The very first thing we're going to notice is skin. Any kind of skin issue, rashes, blotchiness, redness, like all of that is skin related. The skin related things, it goes back to the liver. Acne problems, sluggish liver. rashes, sluggish liver. So if you think of your liver like the kitchen sink, and you wash your dishes, you scrape off the food, you never wash down the sink, you never clean the drain, you never run the garbage disposal, at some point, your sink is going to be this filthy cesspool. And if you aren't using a dishwasher, you're just trying to wash your dishes in this filthy sink, they are not going to come clean. And it doesn't matter how much soap or supplements you're adding to it, right? It's just, you're going to start getting sick from this disgusting, filthy water you're washing your dishes in. Your whole kitchen is going to start stinking and smelling bad, and it's not going to work and function properly. And just like changing an air filter, just like cleaning out the lint in your dryer, it's something you need to do periodically. You can't just never clean your kitchen sink. You can't just never take the lint out of the dryer. It won't function correctly. And so over the last 3 years now, we have been doing liver cleanses. We follow the medical medium's Cleanse to Heal 9-day liver cleanse. That he has several liver cleanses. That one is the one I do most often, but I've done some of his other cleanses as well. And we do those about 6 to 9 times a year. Some as young as our 6-year-old have joined us. When the kids have issues, they choose, hey mom, I think I need to do a cleanse. I'm not feeling so good. I'm getting some acne, whatever it is, like I want to do a cleanse. And for 9 days, we cleanse our liver. We eat tons of fruits and vegetables. We avoid salt and fats, even like healthy fats like avocados and stuff, not because they're bad for us, but because we're trying to give our liver a break and let it just, kind of catch up, right? So we're using the most simple ingredients to allow, like if our liver is trying to break down a Dorito with like 32 ingredients, that's a lot more work than trying to break down a steamed potato or
with no salt, no sauce.
Right, with no salt, with no oil, etc. And so as we do that, and then the last day is like juicing, so you're really just kind of draining, cleaning, cleansing your liver. It feels so much better. Our energy levels go up, our skin is clearer, we avoid colds and flus and illness, and yeah, they still happen, but for the most part, they're like maybe 2 or 3 days. We don't have just lasting illnesses, and we have a big family. So, sometimes we have like one kid gets sick and then the next day the other kid gets, so kind of staggered. Yeah, but it's still, we don't have like 2 or 3 weeks of illness. It's usually just a few days. And I feel like that's because we're preventing it. We're not just throwing all the things at it when it comes. We're doing stuff throughout the year. We're trying to eat healthy throughout the year. We, for the most part, as a family, we avoid a lot of sugar. We avoid dairy. We avoid gluten. We'll eat some of that, but we just don't have it around the house a lot. And we're not super particular about our kids' diet. Like if the kids get candy at church, I'm not really concerned about it because 80% or more of their diet is healthy. So when grandma comes and brings some cupcakes, it's fine, right? Like I'm not, oh my gosh, you're loading my kid up on sugar. I'm like, they're going to be fine because most of their diet is healthy. And again, going back to our mind, what do we believe that food is doing to us? Do I believe that cupcake is going to hurt my child? No, I'm like, okay, there's a cupcake. Their body will know what to do with it. Flush it out. It's not nutrients. It's not good for them, but it's not bad for them. It's not going to kill them, right? So there's that balance there. And I feel like as we have tried to maintain health throughout the year with our diet and avoiding things like, we don't use toxic cleansers and chemicals in our home. We have super clean ingredients from like skincare and makeup and hair, shampoo, deodorant, toothpaste. we avoid toxins in all of those things. We try to get really clean ingredients. We don't use like fragrances and candles and stuff. Again, this time of year, right? Oh, it's fall. I'm going to cozy up and I'm going to turn on my pumpkin spice candle or waxy melt. And that is, I read that those oils, those little waxy things floating around in the air, we're breathing that. It's like smoking a package of cigarettes. Like, it's that bad for our health because it's going in and coating our lungs with little oils and waxes. So we think we're being all fun and cozy and smelling nice for the fall, and we're actually causing a lot of harm to our bodies, to our lungs. And so, yeah, we don't do that. We avoid all of that kind of stuff in our home. And I feel like that is another reason why when something comes up, it's not a big deal for us because we've been preventing illness throughout the year. I do have a little basket of supplements that I will go over. So when I do need some kind of supplement, some kind of outside resource, and my body hasn't been able to, get rid of something right away, there are things that I use to help out, right? So one thing is, okay, this little thing, I'm going to explain what these do. So in our body, we have a lymph system, and our lymphatic system, it is what draws out toxins, and then it pushes them out and secretes them through our urine, through our sweat, through, other places. So we have lymph nodes right here under our, when you get swollen glands, that's your lymph nodes that are swollen. We have them in our armpits, we have them in our groin, under our knees, in our elbows, right? There's little, I can't even think of what it's called, but like gathering places where you have these lymph nodes that cluster, and they can get swollen, especially if you've had some toxins or whatever. You might feel like really sore under your arms or in your groin. So your lymph system does not have its own like pump or, circulatory system. So when we breathe, our blood system, our respiratory system,
when we move.
Right, all those have their own function to move things through, but our lymph system does not. And so it depends on our movement. It depends on our circulatory and respiratory system. So deep breathing is helpful for our lymph system, but movement is super helpful, which is why they recommend that you rebound on a trampoline, or that you swim or run, or just move. So one of the things I do to help push things along and move things out through my lymph system is I use this little fascia blaster. So it's invented, and the purpose of it is to help break up your fascia if your fascia has like little knots, and that's that clear kind of webbing that's over your muscles, right? And so you'll see like massage therapists and chiropractors and stuff using these things, but I do sometimes use it for fascia, but oftentimes I just use it, rub it on my skin, on my arms, my legs, my whole body, just to kind of move my lymph system along. Same thing with this little thing. This isn't a bamboo deodorant applicator. So I have a deodorant that's in a jar. It's like super clean ingredients. I don't use, antiperspirants and aluminum and stuff. I don't want that in my deodorant. So I use deodorant that's in a jar, and it's easy to, apply it right without getting your fingers all nasty. But I've noticed since I've been using this thing, I've noticed a huge difference in my lymph system. It feels like I'm sitting there like draining it as I'm putting my deodorant on every day. I'm like moving and draining my lymph system. So under my arms doesn't feel as tight and painful like it used to when I would get, stuff clogged there, right? So those are two things that I use. When our son David was born, Cory's brother, he was dating a naturopathic doctor at the time, and she gave us this little case of homeopathic pills. And we have used this Highlands little homeopathic pills for 14 years, and they are still mostly full. We've had to replace a couple because the kids lost one and one of the kids dumped one out, but for the most part, they're like halfway to a third full. Some of them a little more. We use these when I do believe homeopathic remedies are very helpful, very useful. The energy of them just helps your body to know what to do. However, a lot of when we use them, it's like a placebo effect for the kids. They're like, Mom, I have a sore throat. I need medicine. And I give them a little homeopathic. And I believe it helps them, but I also believe it helps them, right? Like, oh, my throat feels better. Does their throat really feel better? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, but they believe it does, and it helps them get better. So
we don't explain to them the placebo effect. We just use the principle. Here, this will help you.
Right. Yeah. It's a little sugar pill, basically. I mean, yes, it has if you understand how homeopathics works, yes, it has the energy of that medicine in it, chamomile, belladonna, whatever it is, right? But it's not like a normal pill where you take, oh, well, if I take one Tylenol, then I should take 3 Tylenol if I really want to knock it out, right? With homeopathic, it doesn't matter if you take 1 or 10, it's going to have the same effect. All it's doing is giving you the energy of that plant. So it's not like it's better to take 5 little homeopathic pills. So if the kids swallowed the whole bottle, they'd be fine. Might have a little, sugar rush, but they'd be fine. Okay, so that's one thing we use. We don't use Tylenol or ibuprofen, but when the kids are having some kind of pain, whatever it might be, an earache, a toothache, whatever, we use arnica. That's another homeopathic that really helps. And they have done studies on that. Even, they'll give it to you even at the hospital and doctor's office, like, oh, arnica, it helps with pain. When, if I've had a cold or sore throat or whatever, it's not going away after a few days, liquid zinc is something I may pull out of my cabinet and use. I'll gargle it and then swallow it. And I use that, 2 or 3 times a day until the symptoms go away, which is usually about 24 hours. Another thing is colloidal silver. That one can help with a lot of things. Infections like a goopy eye or, infected skin, rashes, pus, that kind of stuff. Colloidal silver is great for that. Sometimes I ingest it, but a lot of times I use it for like the external things. Toothache, clove oil, it numbs the spot. It also has antimicrobial, antiviral, antibacterial properties, so it can help to cleanse out any bacteria. And then tea tree oil is always good to have on hand. Again, same thing, antiseptic, antibacterial, antiviral. Frankincense oil for any kind of skin issue, very useful. Breathe oil, I use that one a lot because just the smell of it kind of opens up your if you're congested, right? If you have like a sinus infection, it just opens things up. Or if I have like a tickle in my throat, I'll just rub it on my throat with some fractionated coconut oil or whatever, and that. And then ear oil, kids' ear oil, I'll put that in if they are complaining of pain in their ear. I have never had a kid with an ear infection except Eliza. The rest of them, I've like a couple times they've complained of pain in the ear, but it's been like less than a day. So thank the Lord for that. I will use Epsom salt if I need a bath, if I feel like I'm going to draw out, some poisons, if I have muscle aches or, like chills and fever and you just whole body aches, take a bath in Epsom salt. And then the last thing that I have on hand, especially during COVID, we used some of this. Oxylococcinum, I believe is how it's pronounced. It's just a tiny little vial. Ooh, there you go. And it's another homeopathic, and it works really well for any kind of cold or fever or flu. So when I've given my body a few days and it still needs a little extra help, those are the things that I draw on and have on hand to use as a family. That's not something I'm like, everyone needs these in their home, but that's what we use. So if you have your own remedies and things that you use, awesome. That's just some of the things that we use to keep our family healthy and to improve health when we do have something come up. Oh, vitamin C. I'm always like increasing my vitamin C, and I use the ascorbic acid, so like the powdered vitamin C, just mix that up in a drink, and that always boosts your immunity, as well as vitamin D, sunshine, right? Get some fresh air, get outside, breathe in some oxygen, get some sun.
Absolutely. Yeah, that like breathing deeply and getting sun, like two major factors that I was just reading a book and they were mentioning how well, and this actually, what the book said relates to a Joe Rogan podcast I watched, and I can't even remember the guy's name. He had been researching, and he probably wrote a book about this. Actually, I think he did write a book about this. He was researching people's mouths, like the human mouth, and over this, I guess, centuries, over the decades, especially the last few decades, but over the centuries, the human mouth has shrunk. And he said that what that has resulted in is the passages for our airways, because the smaller our mouth, the smaller our nasal passages. And the smaller the passages of air in our back of our throat, and we have a smaller capacity for breathing oxygen. And we went to a dentist, a holistic dentist, Kristi took one of our kids to, and he verified a lot of what this guy said on the Joe Rogan podcast, how that alone, breathing less oxygen, because he was talking, and specifically becoming a mouth breather because of having a smaller mouth. Like that's a whole other issue, like but we're not going to go into great depth. But just basically what this dentist was saying was, like, when you become a mouth breather because your mouth is small and now you don't keep your mouth closed when you're sleeping or when you're awake, but most often when you're sleeping, you become a mouth breather when you sleep, is a cause of many negative side effects with your health, including having lowered immunity. And so, sometimes I'll wear, as I sleep, like a nose strip to open up my nose. That was one of the things that I've experimented with to help get more oxygen when I'm sleeping. But so the last thing that we want to talk about is it's been a bit of a longer podcast here, but it's there's so much more we can say. But the last thing we want to talk about is how we handled COVID, and because it's coming up, new variants and new things, like how are we going to handle new variants in our home? Like, how do we handle COVID, or how did we, and how are we going to handle future COVID variants?
Yeah. So we wore a mask when asked to do so, if we felt like, okay, that's polite. When we were asked to do so in a church or in somebody's local business, we went to the Polynesian Cultural Center in Hawaii, and they were like, we don't want to get shut down, please wear your masks. Okay, we wear our masks, but we did not wear them out of fear. We didn't wear them out of compliance with the government because, you know, we're good citizens. We wore them only out of, you know, politeness. And for the most part, we didn't wear them because we wanted that oxygen, and we didn't feel like restricting our oxygen was a good way to prevent ourselves from getting COVID, right? Everybody was so worried about COVID, and yes, it did, you know, cause harm, and yes, many people died, but we looked around at our family, at, you know, our demographics, and said, okay, it's highly unlikely that you or I are going to have severe repercussions from it, right? If we get it, we get it, which we did. You know, it was
And I
longer.
got it the worst.
Right. But it was like 2 weeks of a fever and chills, and I mean, not 2 full weeks of a fever, but you had a fever and chills, and you had some coughing and some suppressed energy for 2
Well,
weeks.
and it was hard to breathe. Like like that. I can understand why people were afraid when something makes it harder to breathe, and so you're getting less oxygen. And I had the little my dad let me borrow a little tester, and my oxygen absorption levels were going down. Like,
Right.
yeah,
So,
that's
yeah,
scary, and it hurt to breathe deep.
exactly. It was a little,
But I still didn't go to the hospital. I was like, oh, I'll be fine.
right. So I'm not like saying COVID wasn't real. It wasn't a legit thing. There was no reason for anybody to, you know, it was all made up. No, it happened. It was real. But when we looked at our family demographics, we're like, okay, it's really unlikely that it's going to harm any of our children. You and I are pretty healthy people. We should be fine. And we were. For me, it was like 3 days, really raging headache and fever, and then some coughing and just shortness of breath, a little bit of loss of smell. Okay, so it was fine. And we were not, I mean, that was fall of 2021, right? Before we got it. So we went through all of 2020 before we had any, you know, COVID symptoms. And then all of spring and everything and summer of 2020.
Oh, but one thing we did do while we had it, we quarantined ourselves. We self-quarantined and we stayed home.
Yeah, we just stayed home, didn't go anywhere. We didn't try and push ourselves either. Oh, well, I got to get better really fast, right? We didn't throw a million remedies at it. Your dad brought a million remedies, but we didn't use all of them. We used a few things, and
I did take the ivermectin.
Yeah, we used some of the things, and the oxylococcinum, and then, you know, we just drank a lot of celery juice and lemon water and orange juice and other, you know, fresh fruits and veggies, smoothies. We avoided the junk food and dairy and sugar and that stuff, which, you know, causes more congestion. And as we're moving into this, you know, oh no, we're going to have another new variant. Some people are concerned, and I'm like, I'm not. We have kept our family healthy and well, and if we have, you know, issues, I know what to use. I know what to do. I trust in Heavenly Father and His power and His angels in protecting us, and it's just not at all a concern to me. I haven't really thought about it except when other people bring it up. So yeah, that's kind of how we dealt with it when it was going on. There was a lot of unnecessary things that went on. There was a lot of, I feel like, trauma for our children, our youth at school, at, you know, just everybody freaked out. And I just, in the session that I just created about immunity, I do some clearing for trapped emotions that we got as a whole, probably throughout the entire world, from COVID and that experience. Whatever side of COVID you were on, whether you thought masks were great, or you thought masks were oppressive, or whether you thought you should get a COVID shot or you shouldn't get a COVID shot, that you were a bad person for getting one, or you were a good person for not getting, you know, whatever side of COVID you were on, we all experienced this massive conglomerate, compound, trapped emotions together of dread and fear and terror and unsupported and frustration and conflict and blame and just all sorts of things. And that's something that I work on clearing in that immune boost session. And it's something that I don't look forward to if this happens again. The media is really good at working people up and stirring up a bunch of emotion, but we can remain aloof from that, free from that. I mean, we rarely ever watch the news, so it's like not an issue.
Makes it easier.
It does.
Looking ahead to the future. I'm glad I had COVID. Now when future variants come out, I feel like my body, not me up here, my body is more prepared.
Yeah. Right.
Because it's seen it, especially regards to the whole, like, where did it come from? Was it man-made? And who knows? I mean, God knows, but I don't know whether it was man-made or not. But if it was man-made and therefore something that nature didn't create, well, my body's seen it now, so that makes me more prepared. Is now, like, there's a list that society has regarding, like, what diseases and what illnesses you ought to be afraid of. But that's not the expansive list of all diseases out there. It's actually a very small list, right? And COVID is now added to it.
Yeah. So on Wikipedia, there's like 252 different communicable diseases, and there's actually a lot more viruses and variants and all sorts of things that are out there, right? They're always out there floating around, out to get us, according to some people. I don't believe in that. I'm not worried about germs coming after me, right? They're just there. They're on my skin, they're in the air, they're around. My immune system is made to protect me from those things. When I get a cut, oh, look, it got into my bloodstream. Now I might need to cleanse that cut, or do something about it. If it gets into our bloodstream, that's when it's an issue. Otherwise, our body just knows what to do and how to fight it off. And so we're not really worried about that. We're worried about diseases that we're told to fear, right? And those diseases most often are things that there's some kind of very expensive cure for or remedy for, right? So that the drug companies teach us to fear these things. So, you need to be afraid of measles, you need to be afraid of mumps, you need to be afraid of pertussis, you need to be afraid of all the flu, all these different things. We're told, these are bad, these are scary. All these years we were not told to be afraid of the cold, which was coronavirus. And if you look on the back of a bottle of Lysol, from pre-2020, it says kills coronavirus. Okay, well, that's just the common cold. We were never afraid of it before. And then suddenly we were told to be afraid of it. And so there's all these things we're told to be afraid of. Why? So we'll buy these remedies, right? And when's the last time you were concerned about dying from leprosy? Never. When's the last time you thought about getting a leprosy vaccine or inoculating yourself from leprosy or making sure you had a leprosy supplement on hand? Like, never. But more people in the US die every year from leprosy than they do from measles. Oh, but we're all terrified of the measles. Why? Because we're told to be scared of the measles. Because there's a remedy for that, right? That they can make big bucks off of. So if we, like we talked about earlier, not letting fear rule us, if we can understand that here's these illnesses, here's how they play out, here's how they're going to look in our life experience, here's some ways to treat them, here's some concerns if it gets to this point you might want to go in, etc. If we have that knowledge, we don't need to be afraid of any of them. Not tetanus, not whooping cough, not anything any more than any of those others. I watched this video once of Del Bigtree, and he's a journalist, and he was talking about this point, and he had this table full of rice, all these little grains of rice, like so many grains of rice. And then he took like 13 little grains of rice and he colored them with like a black marker, and then he put them back on the table and he said, these are the diseases that we are told to be afraid of. And how come we're not terrified of the whole table of rice? How come we're only terrified of the little black ones that have been brought to our attention, right? We're not afraid of things we don't know about, right? If you're asleep and a spider crawls across you, are you afraid of the spider? No, you didn't even know it happened. We don't need to fear these things that we don't know about, right? And so the only things that we fear are things we're made aware of and told to fear. People didn't used to fear death in a car, from a car accident without a seatbelt on. Then they had this big campaign. Everybody needs to wear seatbelts. Now everybody wears seatbelts. Now everyone's terrified of not wearing seatbelts because they have commercials and all sorts of things and movies showing what could happen if you don't wear a seatbelt. But our parents and grandparents, they drove around in cars and they didn't wear seatbelts. And yes, some of them died. And I'm not saying seatbelts are wrong, but we didn't fear driving in a car without a seatbelt. So when someone brings our awareness to something, suddenly we begin to fear it. Suddenly it becomes a huge issue. And what you focus on grows. So if we don't fear these things, if we don't focus on them, and we provide a healthy immune system so that when they do arise, they're not an issue for us, we can live a much happier, more peaceful, calm life without being stressed out and afraid of flu season, cold season, whatever, it's winter. Oh no, we don't have to worry about that. We can just stay calm, carry on, and live a happy, healthy life.
I definitely feel like, speaking of fear, because fear, again, it goes back to what we said, fear is our enemy, but it's also a tool in somebody else's toolbox to manipulate us. And so I definitely go back to, we as a family hold our faith, and just like the Bible teaches, the shield of faith, we use that as a means of protecting our family. And I'm definitely convinced that that's one of the means of how we protect our family's health is through faith, our faith in God and our faith in our own, what God created, what he gave us, our bodies. By no means have we covered every topic in regards to health and immunity, but we have covered all the bases that we wrote down and had planned to talk about in regards to how we as a family have tried to seek out the optimal best health we can for us individually and as a family. And so we hope that you've enjoyed this podcast, and we hope that you've gotten something out of it, something that you can apply in your own life. So thanks for watching.